This is Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
I'm the only lawyer ever to obtain a court ruling that a president of the United States committed a crime.
For truth. For competition.
As a young lawyer, I helped break up AT&T. That's why you have all your cell phones today.
For sovereignty. For the Republic.
I'm the guy who at Judicial Watch, which I founded, uncovered the Chinagate scandal. Millions of dollars going to the Clinton campaign, corrupting our political system.
For the privacy of citizens.
And I'm the only guy to have enjoined the National Security Agency from mass surveillance on hundreds of millions of Americans.
Tearing it up.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
Bringing it back.
We're going to take this country apart and put it back together again in the way envisioned by our founding fathers.
It's not just talk.
We're not just regurgitating news stories. Larry Klayman, special prosecutor, is making the news.
And now, here's Larry.
Welcome to this week's edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. We have a great show. As my guest, I'm going to have the great Hollywood filmmaker on it, Joel Gilbert. We need that kind of representation in Hollywood. The Hollywood left is going crazy. They're supporting the socialist agendas. They're supporting this anti-Semitism. Ironically, Hollywood is filled with my brothers and sisters. You know, I'm a Jewish Christian. I've always said that. I believe in Jesus, but I'm also very proud of my Jewish heritage. And in fact, in my view, the two religions are joined at the hip. One is the statute, the other is the regulations. Jesus was a rabbi. Recently, we just went through Easter, and of course, he was at the Passover dinner the night before he was crucified, and 3 days later, he was resurrected. So we are the same people, but Hollywood seems not to understand that. And in fact, if they had to, they'd support the Palestinians, the radical Palestinians, over Israel. So listen to what Joel has to say, because what's important today is that we get the news and we get an understanding from a lot of different sources. There's too much emphasis on Fox News. They're powerful, they're rich. In fact, in the early days when it started, I helped build that network through what I was doing at Judicial Watch. I gave them the news, the Clinton scandals. I was on a lot. Matt Drudge was too. There were other people. But Fox has changed over time. And I always found that even though ideologically I was closer to Fox, obviously, than MSNBC or CNN, although those two networks weren't off the rails back in the 1990s. I mean, now they've gone absolutely communist. CNN, the communist news network, MSNBC, used to have as its motto, lean forward. I would say bend over was the more appropriate way of referring to them. Who knows what their motto is today? It's basically destroy the country and have it taken over by ultra-leftists, atheists, radicals, you know, whatever. But we need competition. And going all the way back in the early years of Fox, as I said, although I felt more akin to them and they had me on, I was on the other networks too, I never found them to be very ethical. And I wrote about that in my book, Horrors, Why and How I Came to Fight the Establishment, which you still can buy at Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com. It's my life story. It's my autobiography. And I write these columns every week, and that's important too. Some people ask me, Larry, why don't you become more moderate? Why don't you try to be more mainstream, more diplomatic? You know, I don't want to go on Fox News just to say what everybody else has said. And that's what Fox is today. When you go back in time during the Obama administration, you could never make reference on Fox News that Obama was half Muslim and believed that he was totally Muslim. That's the way he acted. He hated Israel. He's an anti-Semite. He's the precursor to Representative Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib. He's the one who whipped up this anti-Semitism, and he whipped up a race war between blacks and whites, between others. You know, he was just some angry guy who, unfortunately, in his part, because he was between two worlds, he was half white, half black, I think he resented that he was never really fully accepted in either community. And of course, you should be fully accepted in every community. But this is the perception that I believe he had. So he struck back, particularly at whites, at Jews, and at others. And we're starting to see the real serious effects of this right now. But you could never mention the Muslim identification of Obama on Fox News. They wouldn't also discuss the birth certificate issue. You know, we're called birthers, okay? The fact is that birth certificate, whether Obama's born in Kenya or not, is fraudulent. It says that he was born in 1961. It says he was African American. That term wasn't used in 1961. That was invented by Jesse Jackson in the 1970s and caught hold. When I was a kid, they were called Negroes. Then they wanted to be called blacks. Now they want to be called African Americans. That's fine. Whatever you want to be called is fine. They call me whites, okay? They call me a Jewish Christian, whatever the case may be. I don't care what people call me. You can't be that sensitive. We used to have a show, All in a Family, which tried to desensitize people on TV about, stereotypes, both racially, ethnically. This is Fox News. You can't talk about that. And then, of course, there's Hannity, who runs away from anything when the heat gets too hot in the kitchen. He's a good showman. He says the same thing every night. He has the same guests. It gets extremely boring. I can't watch it anymore. He promises great results. There's going to be justice here. There's going to be justice there. That's to get viewers. That's to get advertising dollars. But when the heat gets too hot in the kitchen, whether it's a Cliven Bundy or a Judge Roy Moore or Sheriff Joe Arpaio, Hannity's for Hannity. He runs away from things. And consequently, that's frankly, what I saw back in the 1990s. He used to go behind my back with my clients and try to get them on the air. The Clinton women who were sexually harassed, threatened with IRS audits, their kids were assaulted, in effect, to keep them quiet because Hillary wanted to be president someday. So it wasn't good for her husband to be exposed, no pun intended, with regard to all these women that he was having affairs with. Well, Hannity would go behind my back and get some of the women to come on. I had lawsuits, and I didn't even know that they were asked to go on. Now, Hannity's a good-looking guy. My clients, I guess, kind of liked him, so they said, okay, I'll come on. I turned the TV on, and there they are, being asked questions like they're in a deposition, and I don't even know. And he didn't have the courtesy to even call me. So that's Fox News. Now, today, you see that Fox is moving left. You see that Andrew Napolitano is taking a shot at the president nearly every single day. He calls himself a judge. I wouldn't call Andrew Napolitano a judge, okay? He's not a bad guy. He probably wanted a job with Trump. He never got it, kind of like George Conway, Kellyanne Conway's husband, who didn't get a job in the Trump administration, and they take it out on the president personally. You've got Chris Wallace, Fox News Sunday, that trashes the president every week. You've got Shepard Smith. You've got others. Fox is run by the Murdoch brothers now. They are not conservatives. The only reason this network has a conservative cast, or at least they promote themselves like that, is because of the market that Larry Klayman, Matt Drudge, Ann Coulter, and others developed for them. It's a cash cow. That's why they're the leading network in terms of viewers, because most of the people in this country still are conservative libertarian. They're certainly not leftist, although that's growing because of the immigration that's coming in. In California, if you're an illegal immigrant, you can vote. In New York, if you're an illegal immigrant, you can vote. Just get a driver's license. But this is why I say it's important for you to hear people like Joel Gilbert and to watch his films. He's a great filmmaker. It's important for you to tune in to other networks like Sinclair Broadcasting, which has more local stations than any other network in the entire country, and they're very conservative. You watch Newsmax, they have some conservative people coming on. They're a little bit in between, but watch them as well. I would say watch One America News, OAN, I-24, which comes out of Jaffa, Israel, but it's a conservative network, and Jewish Life TV, okay, which is going through a transformation right now, but they're going to come out of it as another conservative network. And then, of course, you have this show, Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Share that, because we got to get the word out. We waged a revolution in 1776 by using the printing press. It's important that we get our message out, we communicate to the American people, we educate, and we tell people exactly what's happening that's good in this country and what's not good. But let me tell you about Fox News this week, because I brought a lawsuit against Fox News for Laurie Loon. You have heard of her before. She's been on this show. She was the one who was most significantly sexually harassed and abused by Roger Ailes. Literally, there was a female reign of terror at Fox News. Fox News has reportedly paid out, under the table, $123 million to keep women quiet that Roger Ailes sexually harassed and others at the networks sexually harassed as well. I'm talking about men. Now, we can't look the other way to that, but the problem here is this, is that Laurie Loon was sold out. When everything hit the fan, when Gretchen Carlson revealed, she was, of course, a host, former Miss America, that Roger Ailes had come on to her, that had asked for sex in exchange for promotions. It all came out of the woodwork, and Laurie Lune was the major one who was harmed. And Fox was worried that she might come out and talk because some of the abuse that she took was just unbelievable. Go to LarryKlayman.com. I'm representing her in my personal capacity. Read the complaint that we filed against Fox News and Suzanne Scott, who's currently the CEO of Fox News, just this week. It's sworn to under oath. I wouldn't have filed it if Laurie didn't swear to it under oath. We have to know that those facts are accurate. Is that Laurie Lune was sold out. Gretchen Carlson was paid off with $20 million. Others were paid off with a lot. O'Reilly, who had allegedly sexually harassed a lot of people, wound up paying about $80 million, somewhat of his own money, to bury it. It was all kept quiet. But then it came out of the woodwork, and sent in Laurie's direction were psychiatrists and lawyers that had conflicts of interest that sold her out, and she got pennies compared to what other people got in an agreement. Well, recently, an interview was given to the Los Angeles Times by the current head of Fox News, who replaced Roger Ailes. Her name is Suzanne Scott. Suzanne Scott was one of the enablers of Roger Ailes. She knew what was going on. They all ran around trying to keep it quiet, trying to keep Laurie Lune and the others under wraps, even though it eventually came out. But who did the Murdochs put in when Roger Ailes was fired and he was forced out? They wouldn't have fired him if it wasn't made public what happened. It was Suzanne Scott. And why was she put in there? Because she's a woman. This was cover. But it's the biggest outrage. It's despicable that a woman would cover up all the sexual abuse. She sold out her fellow women. And recently she gave an interview to the LA Times where she says, I knew nothing. I didn't know what was going on. You know, that's like Germans after World War II saying we didn't know that there was a concentration camp right in the middle of Munich called Dachau, right in the center of the city. I'm going to be right back with the second segment of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman.
Fearless.
Disclaimer, he's crazy, he's racist, he's out to kill the Democrats.
Dangerous.
You don't care, he uses the court and the law.
Lethal.
This is bad.
Special Prosecutor
Very bad.
Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
So I want you to read that complaint that we filed on behalf of Laurie Lune, because Fox News is now being run by a woman that was put in place to keep the female bodies buried. And we're asking that Fox News either try to settle this case, or we're going to go to trial, and we're going to put all the people at Fox News and those who have left on the witness stand to show that there's this giant cover-up which is continuing today. And if you look at this complaint that was filed, it would appear that Fox News, and there are certainly reasons to believe that the Southern District of New York, the U.S. Attorney, is investigating Fox News right now with regard to the payments to the women that weren't properly reported to the public and shareholders and others. Fox News is in a lot of trouble. So that's why I say, go to these other networks, start watching them. Watch what Joel Gilbert turns out. Watch what my friend Jason Goodman does at Crowdsource the Truth. What we do at Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. You've got to start branching out and not just watching Fox News. And that's the weakness of the president. You know, he looks at Fox News. I love the president, but he hires everybody from Fox News. He's dependent on Fox News, when recently he's been double-crossed by Fox News. Bernie Sanders was put on. They packed the audience with Bernie Sanders supporters. They trashed the president. You know, they're trying to play both sides of the street. And the reason is Lachlan Murdoch and James Murdoch, who now control Fox Corporation, which is an entity unto itself. Most of the holdings of Fox were sold off to Disney. It's moving in a different direction. Now, let me talk about what's happening right now with a few other things. We're going to be filing a complaint with regard to Ilhan Omar. We're going to file in U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia because the Department of Homeland Security has not informed us that they're investigating her allegedly having married her brother and committing immigration fraud, as well as her connections with groups like CARE, which we know as an unindicted co-conspirator in the Holy Land Foundation case in Dallas many years ago, has contacts and collaborates with terrorist interests. So we're going to be doing that in the next week. Watch what we do. We do these things. Judicial Watch doesn't do these things. Judicial Watch gets documents, okay? Fine, get documents. But what do you do once you get the documents? We're moving ahead with our citizens' grand juries, with our hard-hitting cases. And, of course, we've been representing Cliven Bundy and Ryan Bundy over the years, and we're now enmeshed in an appeal of the dismissal of the indictment, which Obama caused to be made against them, mainly because Cliven used the word Negro. He thought that was the right word. He was referring to him and his family as being persecuted like the Negro by the federal government. Well, Obama took offense. Go to Cliven Bundy, defensefund.org. Watch that video, or you can call it up on YouTube, when Obama threatened Cliven over the use of the word Negro. And, of course, Cliven, his sons, and other peaceful protesters were indicted a couple years later by Loretta Lynch, who had her own problems, believe me. She was the mirror image, the flip side of Obama in many, many respects. Anyway, we're going through an appeal now at the Ninth Circuit because the government prosecutors of the U.S. Attorney's Office in the District of Nevada wouldn't take no for an answer. Even this Judge Navarro, appointed by Barack Obama, recommended by the evil and corrupt senator at the time, Harry Reid, even she had to dismiss the indictment when it came out during trial that representatives, agents of the Bureau of Land Management and FBI lied on the witness stand, that the prosecutors were hiding exculpatory evidence that could acquit the Bundys. And then at the end, a whistleblower came forward by the name of Larry Wooten, who said there was a kill list on the heads of the Bundys and other atrocities. And they attempted to keep him quiet. The head prosecutor, Stephen Myray, first U.S. attorney at the time, threatened him. So despite all that, they took an appeal. And it wasn't taken by the Maine Justice Department, by the U.S. Attorney's Office, because they're trying to cover their rear ends so they don't lose their law licenses, hoping that the Ninth Circuit rules in their favor, reverses, and sends the case back for a trial. The Bundys still face the prospect of life imprisonment if this thing goes back and a jury comes out a different way. We need your support for that. Go to ClivenBundyDefenseFund.org. We need the support and see what's going on, because this is the same tyranny that was carried out against President Donald Trump, continues to be carried out against President Donald Trump, against you. It can happen to you and your family, what happened to the Bundys. Read about it, and this is what we're fighting against. It's not going to happen by the U.S. Justice Department. They're the problem. It's the American people that need to stand up. I'm going to be right back with Joel Gilbert. And thank you for listening. And in the meantime, go to freedomwatchusa.org and join our Justice League.
And now, 4 words that make corrupt politicians make wee-wee in their little pants.
Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this presidency.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
Be the one who makes our country great again. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and donate.
I'm here with my really good friend, colleague, a tremendously talented filmmaker in Hollywood, conservative, that's quite rare in Hollywood, I might add, and someone who is a tremendous investigative reporter. You know, watch what Joel does, look at his films. I want him to give the introduction in terms of what he's done so you can go and find it and watch it before we get into some substance here. But Joel, welcome to Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. And in your case, I was Special Defense Counsel with Larry Klayman. We're going to talk a little bit about that and what's going on in the country today. But give the listeners an understanding, better understanding of who you are. You've been on before, and the great works that you've done in the past, and you know what you're trying to do in the future.
Great to be here. Thanks. Good morning, Larry. Well, my film's pretty well known. I've been making films for about 15 years. I originally made a lot of movies about Hollywood icons and music icons, Bob Dylan, Paul McCartney, and Elvis Presley. About 2007, I made a film about the Middle East, showing the entire history of the Islamic conflict with Judaism, with Christianity. It's called Farewell Israel. and then followed up with Atomic Jihad about the Iranian nuclear program. And then I turned to looking into Barack Obama's background, something that had only been done on a cursory level. Went out to Hawaii twice, and I discovered a mountain of evidence that Obama's real biological father was, in fact, Frank Marshall Davis, a Soviet agent out of Chicago who worked for the Communist Party USA and had raised Obama, indoctrinated and radicalized him. This is someone that Obama talked about in his book, Dreams from My Father, quite a bit, 2,500 words, and that Obama admits influenced him. So I really created an alternate history of Obama's life story, different from what the mainstream media was saying through my investigation. And I think it really moved the bar. People started to realize that Obama is not who he says he is. He does have a radical background. And when people react today and say, oh, the Democratic Party suddenly took a turn to the left, well, in fact, Obama was kind of a stealth radical. He ran as a mainstream candidate. I'm going to cut the deficit in half. Marriage is between a man and a woman and God. I'm going to support Israel. But it was all a lie. He never intended any of that stuff. And so we did experience a radical regime for 8 years under Obama. And if you look at Dreams from My Real Father, you really understand why and what the history of the radical left is and how they train people like Obama. And today you simply see the army of these leftists now coming to the forefront, where they're no longer stealth radicals. They're openly admitting to their radical agenda. Then I made There's No Place Like Utopia. It was a film where I, kind of a Michael Moore style, where I went around, Detroit, Chicago, New Jersey, talking to people, a lot of black folks in inner cities about whether they support this radical agenda, looking at the reality of socialism in these cities that have been controlled by Democrats for 50, 60 years. And they all said, we don't want legalization of drugs. We want more police. We don't want less police. We don't want illegals coming into our cities and driving down our wages. They were actually the biggest conservatives in the country, but they had been conned to vote for Obama because of skin color and scared into thinking, well, you got to vote for Obama or we're going to die. He's got our interest at heart because he shares skin color. And nothing could be farther from the truth. Obama did nothing for black people. Everything got much, much worse. And you can really see that today with how the black community has been much more successful under Trump's economy.
But he did. Well, let me just interrupt you here. He did one thing. He stoked a race war between blacks and whites. While doing nothing for them, he pitted the two races against each other, which we're starting to see the ramifications in a very severe way today.
Yeah, absolutely. Like during Obama, when he was elected, I think it was Breitbart had an article, 70% of blacks and whites at the beginning when he was elected said they are very favorable in terms of how they view race relations. Once Obama got into office, it went, and today it is at 30-30. Race relations are terrible. So Obama's agenda was not to bring anybody together. It was a total lie. The radical left, it's been their tactic since the 30s to use race to divide Americans and use the division to take power. And it's a very evil idea. And Obama was up to that. And the radical left openly recruit today minorities who will repeat their stories, their radical socialist stories. Andrew Gillum in Florida, radical socialist agenda. He was trained by white radical socialists in San Francisco at the Rockwood Institute, just as Obama was trained at the Midwest Academy in Chicago by white radicals from the 60s socialist movements. And Andrew Gillum, were he elected in Florida, he would have done everything that would have been opposite of what would have helped black people, because he's simply a tool of the radical socialist agenda, the same as Obama was.
Tell us a little bit, Joel. Actually, nobody knew this because we didn't publicize it at the time, but you were actually involved in the Muller witch hunt, in the investigation which went on, supposedly concluded. Of course, it really hasn't concluded. Now it's moving over to Congress and the media, trying to take the president apart. He will be impeached 100%. Question is, he won't likely be convicted in the Senate, but who knows with the turncoat Republicans over there, what can happen. But you were actually involved in that Mueller investigation. Explain that to the listeners.
Well, it's interesting. I was just an observer like anybody else, reading the news and looking at the different takes between CNN and Fox, how they, characterize this Mueller investigation. Of course, I I'm on Trump's Twitter feed, so, every other day it's a witch hunt and so on. So I'm just like anybody else thinking, I wish this thing would wrap up. Let's see if there's anything real. I doubt it. And let's have the country move on. This seems to be something that's dragging out forever for no reason. I think the Congress had already decided that there was nothing of this nature, and there were very dubious things coming out about, which we still know today. We're waiting to get more information about where this collusion thing really started, and was Trump set up and spied on and so forth. My buddy Bruce Orr, I grew up with Bruce Orr in Tennessee, and I knew Bruce quite well. I knew him to be a very honest kid, and I doubted that he would lie or do anything, to mislead Congress based on how I knew what I knew of him. And certainly when his transcript recently came out, I think that was that bared out that he was very honest in the end, even though it seems like he was involved in some nefarious things, I think mostly through his wife, who was seemed to be heavily involved with Russia in her studies and lived over there for a time. But sure enough, I've met and known many people through my documentary film activities, and of course I knew Dr. Jerome Corsi because he covered my films, Dreams from My Real Father, There's No Place Like Utopia. He wrote several articles, and I was just shocked that I think it was last October, I was at a business meeting, and some guy walked up to me, nice-looking guy, smiled and said, "Hey, Joel, how are you?" And I thought it was somebody I knew, so I just kind of shook his hand. And he whipped out a badge. He said, "I'm with the FBI. Can I come? Can I talk to you? Can you come outside?" And I thought, what in the world could this be about? And sure enough, he handed me a subpoena to appear at the U.S. District Court in the grand jury on Constitution Avenue 3 days later. I'm here in California. They want me to be in California, 3 days later. And I said, "What is this about?" I couldn't imagine why they would want to talk to me. Sure enough, this subpoena was signed by Robert Muller. I said, "What's this about?" And he said, "Well, if you sit down, I've got some questions for you." And I said, "Okay, I'd like to hear what this is about." First question he asks is, "Do you know Dr. Jerome Corsi?" And right away, of course, I said, "Well, I decided I don't want to answer any questions." But it just, obviously they were going to ask me about Dr. Corsi, who has covered my films since 2008, maybe. He covered Atomic Jihad. He covered a number of films. So right there, I really understood, wow, now you really feel what a witch hunt is and what happens if you don't have democratic institutions and you have subversion of the system. Here I am in California. I'm a filmmaker, and it sounded like they want to talk to everybody who talked to Corsi, because Corsi, I guess, worked with Roger Stone on some level, and that meant that everybody that I knew would next be subject to subpoena. That's a witch hunt. So, of course, what happened is I had contacted you, Attorney Larry Klayman. You had communicated with the special counsel that I wasn't able to come in, to Washington on 3 days' notice, and they simply said, "Well, we'll let you know later if we need you," and we never heard from them again. So it really came home that obviously I never went and testified. I wouldn't have known anything. And it sounded like they just were going to try to grill me about Dr. Corsi or try to catch him in some kind of, inconsistency about something he did or I interacted with him over the years. So that was pretty shocking. It really comes home when the government comes to your doorstep to try to get you to come to testify under oath about things you don't even know about.
Fortunately, Joel, we got a good result for Dr. Corsi. We're pushing back. We've sued the special counsel, Robert Mueller, the FBI, the Justice Department. We have criminal complaints pending at the Justice Department. Don't expect anything there, or at the Office of Disciplinary Counsel in Washington, D.C., because everybody that runs that is donated heavily to Democrats, Clinton, the rest of them. But we have our own private lawsuits, and we push back. And the moral to the story is that by having Larry Klayman, I'm not promoting myself, but they know that anybody I represent is not going to roll over like a puppy dog and let them, massage their belly. I mean, they're going to pay a price, and it worked with regard to you and Dr. Corsi, and now we're fighting back.
Yeah, I have no idea. I don't know why they never got back to us, but I guess I just assumed that you were a lot more trouble than I was worth, and they never got back to us.
I've always said it's a little bit like the club that you put on your car steering wheel. You see that advertised on TV at late night shows. Go steal somebody else's car. It's too hard to steal my car. And that's what happened. And, it's not that I'm a genius or anything like that. It's common sense. It's, 42 years of experience of being a lawyer is that you just cannot roll over to the government and hope things are going to be okay. But let's talk a little bit about Hollywood. You've been experienced. You're kind of like a fish out of water in many ways of the mainstream of Hollywood. So am I when I'm out there, and so are others that were part of an organization at one time of conservative producers, actors, writers, etc. But, what do you go through in Hollywood in terms of trying to succeed and the pushback? And I might say, we're both Jewish. I'm Messianic. But, the Hollywood left is largely run by the leftist Jewish community there, and they really have little to no affinity, to put it most nicely, with Israel or anything Jewish. I mean, they're basically socialists, and they're radicals. They're rich, so they can afford to pay taxes. At least let's assume they pay taxes, but they don't have the best interests of even the Jewish people at heart. So I want you to give us some insight on that, because you've been living through this most of your adult life.
Right. Well, it's certainly gotten worse over time. And I'd say that immediately one of the most practical things I deal with every day that is most disappointing is that very talented people who contribute to my films in some way, whether music scores or graphics or illustrations, it's almost shocking that to a person they don't want a movie credit. And they do good work, and normally you want to build up your movie credits on IMDb so you can go to the next thing and say, hey, this film, Dreams from My Real Father, it sold millions of copies, and I did some graphic work on this film. Normally you want credits to be built up, but to a person, everyone is afraid to get a credit. So my credit roll is just like me and maybe a couple other people, because people don't want credits because they're afraid of retaliation from the industry if you're identified with any kind of project that doesn't toe the line of the official socialist storyline.
Oh, we have about 30 seconds left, Joel. Tell people where they can go to order your movies and look at what you do, because it's very important that you play a major role here educating people. We've got about 15 seconds now.
Okay. So highway61ent.com, highway61ent.com for Highway 61 Entertainment. Of course, on Amazon, all my films, Dreams from My Real Father, There's No Place Like Utopia, Trump, The Art of the Insult, my film last year. I have a very big project I'll be unveiling in June, so absolutely stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Thank you. God bless you, my good friend. You'll be back soon on Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman.
Before he was a trial lawyer, he sliced him and diced him.
People used to ask me, Larry, what caused you to start Judicial Watch and now Freedom Watch, given the powerful forces in this country that put you at risk?
In a meat packing plant.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
A very special prosecutor, Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
Now the verdict, ladies and gentlemen. The verdict is that we have to do it for ourselves. We cannot depend on the establishment, whether it's the establishment in government, Democrat or Republican, or the establishment in the media. Okay, the establishment in the media is Fox News from a so-called conservative perspective. As I said, Fox News is moving left every single week. They've got a huge audience. They want to expand it into the left. So they bring on these characters like Andrew Napolitano and Chris Wallace and Shepard Smith and the rest of them. They want to play both sides of the street. Well, Larry Klayman doesn't play both sides of the street. Now, neither does Joel Gilbert, neither does Jason Goodman, neither does all these people that are out there that are trying to explain to the American people why conservative and libertarian values were the values of our founding fathers and why we need to protect that. And that's why we don't sit around waiting for other people to do things. As I've said many times, my former group Judicial Watch, when I ran it, the mission was to investigate and prosecute government corruption and abuse. When I left to run for the U.S. Senate in Florida, it became transparency in government. Well, okay, transparency, fine. Freedom of Information Act cases are easy. You just have to file the request. When you don't get a response, you file a lawsuit. It goes to a judge. Eventually, the government coughs up the documents years later, usually well after you need them. But entities like Fox News want those documents, so they'll put Tom Fitton on the air, and he'll beat his chest, and I'm great, and here's another victory. They'll do fundraising and say they have a lawsuit against so-and-so. It's not really a lawsuit against so-and-so. It's a lawsuit to get documents, okay? And that's what we need. We need people like Larry Klayman, like Freedom Watch, and we need you who support Freedom Watch. Go to freedomwatchusa.org to really be the Justice Department and to really be the Paul Revere telling the people that they need to rise up to save our country. Documents are good. Put them, where the sun don't shine, though, because we've gotten documents over and over again. I'm tired of watching Fox News saying, okay, we've learned this, we've learned that. Well, what are you doing about it? Okay, and that's why you need to support freedomwatchusa.org. We have lawsuits, not just with regard to Laurie Loon. That's my personal lawsuit for her as a private practitioner. We have lawsuits dealing with the Bundys. We have lawsuits against the social media companies that are discriminating against conservatives. We have lawsuits pushing back for libel and slander against all of the various leftist media entities, whether it's CNN or whether it's MSNBC or NBC or the Washington Post, New York Times, Huffington Post, Rolling Stone, and others. We're actually trying to do something. Now, we don't always succeed because we get these judges sometimes that are very leftist, and judges in the federal system in particular are appointed on the basis of political patronage in politics, but we keep punching. And if we win 1 in 10 cases, and we win more than that, that's a lot. We break through. Years ago, we enjoined the National Security Agency from mass surveillance. We also killed Obama's executive order for amnesty for 5 million illegal aliens. I won for Jerry Corsi, for Cliven Bundy, for others. We've scored major victories in the last years, but we got to keep punching, and we cannot give up peacefully and legally. And now we have citizens' grand juries that, I hope to start them sooner, but I get sidetracked by some of these things. We are going to be starting them in May, and they're going to be powerful because we are going to indict, try, convict, and sentence people like the Clintons, the Obamas, the James Comeys, the Rod Rosensteins, the Bruce Orrs, others. They need to be held accountable by the American people. And that's what separates Larry Klayman and Freedom Watch from the rest. You'll get direct mail out there. Oh, we have a petition. Sign this petition. That's all it is. Sign the petition so we can then solicit more money from you. When you contribute to Freedom Watch, we're actually doing stuff with that. We're doing hard-hitting stuff. And I'm putting my reputation, my livelihood on the line. I'm putting everything on the line for the American people. So go to freedomwatchusa.org. Support us. Go to ClivenBundyDefenseFund.org. Support Cliven. Go to CorseyDefenseFund.com. Support Jerry Corsi. That's continuing on. They're continuing to persecute him. I'll be back next week with another edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Until then, God bless you. God bless your family. God bless America. And God save America.